It's Rickett. With nature. Fantastic stories of climate.
So one quick thing, I have like really long quotes on some slides, but I will read them out so you don't have to read them while I'm talking. Okay, so reconciliation with nature, fantastic stories of climate hope. In times of anthropogenic climate change, desertification, species extinction, and natural forces such as earthquakes, not only visualize how humanity is, quote, at the mercy of larger forces of nature, quote, end, but also evoke various emotional responses, particularly phobia and eco-anxiety. While the concept of the Anthropocene may have had beneficial effects, such as the introduction of the anthropos as a hyper-object, there is a growing number of critics who emphasize its problematic nature regarding its, quote, hegemonic status in the hierarchies of knowledge, quote, end, and its neglect of non-human agency and racialized subjects. Okay. Subsequently, several novel proposals for new scenes emerged that may facilitate a more nuanced understanding of our surroundings, such as Haraway's Scene and Mameni's Terracene. In a similar vein, fantastic stories have to come include more nuanced representations of the human nature binary that reflect human dependency on and entanglement with nature. Examining first the HBO adaptation Game of Thrones and then N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy, I will demonstrate how these narratives not only depict the disastrous consequences of ecological exploitation and human hubris, but also represent us with hopeful stories that may provide solutions to climate change. To do so, I focus on two main theories, namely Parker's Gothic natures and Bennett's vital materiality. For the TV show, I want to highlight how it is not only a commercial success story, but can indeed provide insights and engender hope in handling the consequences of human-induced climate change. As another narrative of hope, N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy shifts the focus from nature as something humans can subdue to an acknowledgement of nature as an actant with whom nature needs to reconcile. While Game of Thrones starts out as a political fantasy drama mostly concerned with whom sits on the Iron Throne, the story slowly turns away from the political mind games, focusing on the threat beyond the wall instead. When several characters realize that the White Walkers pose a real danger, their task becomes to convince political players such as Cersei Lannister that, quote, the army of the undead is indeed not a story made up by wet nurses to frighten children, quote, end. To demonstrate how Gothic nature is equipped to address climate change concerns, I will first outline how the space north of the wall generally transformed into Gothic nature, and then turn to the Walkers in particular. Leading to nature, first, Parker establishes that the human is related to the notion of civilization, which is constructed in terms of order and nature, conversely being constructed in terms of chaos. Accordingly, Gothic nature in Game of Thrones is established through various characters commenting on being unable to control the space beyond the wall, since you can't tame a wild thing, you can't trust a wild thing, wild creatures have their own rules, their own reason, you never know them. In accord with the Gothic tradition of dull and thus desolate landscapes, the images of the space beyond the wall are dark colored, showing a misty scenery of snowy hills and forests up until the horizon. The only sound being the howling of the wind, evoking an eerie feeling. With wild nature stretching out as far as the eye can see, the wall becomes the border between civilization and wilderness. Leading to nature being set against civilization is Gothic nature as a space of trial. That is, a space that both threatens human survival as well as offers education. First, Game of Thrones incorporates this by highlighting the brutality of the space beyond the wall through various encounters with the free folk. Then, Bran's journey beyond the wall establishes its educational purpose. Further, through the representation of the children of the forest, the space beyond the wall becomes an anti-Christian space, and so far as the children participate in a, quote, animistic, ecocentric pagan religion, quote, end. As Parker points out, Christian doctrine established paganism as its other, and thereby tied it to our fears of the evil forest, linked to contemporary ecophobic anxieties. Through the children, Gothic nature becomes then also associated with the post-colonial past and the human unconscious, insofar as they created the White Walkers as a defense against the human colonizers. When Game of Thrones further introduces people in the North as being able to, quote, enter the minds of animals, quote, end, the show establishes a pagan Cthulhu scene where everything is intrinsically linked. Related to the juxtaposition of Christian place and pagan space is a devil who's met in the woods, who serves as a way to re-enchant nature by obscuring, quote, the lines between the terror sublime and the uncanny, between living and the dead. The series realizes this by first establishing the White Walkers as monstrous entity, waiting in the woods, and then by emphasizing the interconnection with humanity so that the line between life and death is transgressed. During the show, the walkers and their army grow out not to be singular monsters, but, quote, an all-encompassing monstrous environment, quote, end, that relates them to what Morton termed hyperobject. Hyperobjects are things, events, and concepts that are hyper in that they are quote, massively distributed in time and space relative to human, quote, end. Even though we understand what they mean, we cannot grasp them. The walkers are hyper in the sense that they are vicious and stick to the human. They start out as local, but quickly transcend borders of any kind and are thus a non-local entity. They slept, quote, beneath the ice for thousands of years, quote, end, and hence, quote, involve profoundly different temporalities than the human scales want, quote, end. And their consumption of the human links them to the end of the world, quote, rendering both denialism and apocalyptic environmentalism obsolete, quote, end. The fear of being consumed is thereby what Parker identifies as another marker of Gothic nature. She further emphasizes that in Gothic nature, it is not the human who is the consumer, but instead they are represented as the endangered species. Hence, the anthropocentric idea of human control and nature's sole existence to support human life is negated. Hereby, the walkers are portrayed as agents with their own mind, set on building their army of undead to consume all lively matter. Even though Game of Thrones confronts the audience with an impalpable threat, hope enters the narrative when the characters begin to convince each other that nature and its agents, that is the walkers, can only be fought by humanity as a whole. An important moment of which is when Jon takes Daenerys to a cave where he shows her ancient wall paintings. They were here together, the children and the first man. Doing what? Fighting each other. They fought together against the enemy, despite their differences, despite the suspicion, together. And we need to do the same if we are to survive. Disregarding the process of both the human and the undead army coming together, what engenders hope in the TV show is the ultimate triumph of humanity over the walkers in the Battle of Winterfell. However, I do not read this as a triumph of humanity over nature, but as a tale of how we may reconcile with our past mistake of exploiting nature, since the walkers only appear to be tied to nature, but are actually none other than us. Two episodes are important here. First, an old keeper, the king of the White Walkers, turns a human baby boy into one of them. Second, in the episode The Door, the audience can watch how the children of the forest turn one of the human colonizers into that same king. The scene ends with one of the children explaining, "We were at war. We were being slaughtered, our sacred trees cut down, we needed to defend ourselves, from you, from man." Besides introducing colonialism as the walker's origin, through the interconnection between nature, indigeneity, the monster, and the human, Game of Thrones not only dissolves the human nature binarism, but also directly points to the connection between climate change and colonialism. Evoking, quote, our more bloody histories, quote, end, humanity's triumph over the walkers does not only demonstrate the importance of fighting climate change as one global community, but also emphasizes the importance of facing our colonial past in order to do so. As Game of Thrones, quote, taps into our deepest fears by stripping away all sense of order, stability, meaning, and permanence, and replacing it with a vision of destructive chaos, quote, end, the show portrays how life itself is disintegrated when humanity does not at least try to band together to survive climate change and to overcome their bloody histories. The impalpable threat of being consumed by the White Walkers creates a horrific Cthulhu scene that foregrounds feelings of ecophobia and eco-anxiety. At a time when climate change, quote, turns the sheltering eyes and starving bears into victims of hubris rather than the monsters of the yore, quote, end, the walkers as Arctic Gothic monsters are an apt trope to expose human complicity in climate change, warning us that this crisis, in Jon Snow's words, isn't about living in harmony, it's just about living. Okay, similar to the White Walkers being, quote, an avenging force, eliminating troublesome humans from the environment, quote, end, M.K. Jemisin also explores this trope in constructing her fantastic Cthulhu scene. In Broken Earth, humans are categorized in stills and orogeny. The latter can connect with their material surroundings to influence Father Earth's movement. Over the course of the novels, readers are further introduced to so-called stone eaters, mineral beings that were either created by Father Earth or come into being when an orogeny uses too much earthly magic and is reborn. The entanglement of humans, material beings, and the earth is then what establishes a Schuttele-scene in which, as I will show in the following, the human is not in control but subordinate to the planet. On the fictive planet called the Stillness, life is almost impossible to flourish due to the fifth season, described as winter, spring, summer, fall. Death is the fifth and master of all. Examples of past fifth seasons are the boiling season, during which a hot spot triggered acidic rain and sky occlusion, the fungus season, which led to a fungal bloom resulting in famine, or the breathless season caused by a mining accident, which led to a fire sinkhole spreading. Besides highlighting the effect of possible climate catastrophes, these seasons mark Father Earth as terracine. Just as Mameni defines terracine as, quote, a world of terror with multiple endings in war, disease, and ecological damage, quote end, also Father Earth is a space on which ecological damage has been inflicted, leading to lawless times of war and cannibalism, as well as outbreaks of diseases that reduce human population. However, Father Earth is not an inanimate globe made up from dull matter, but becomes introduced as a sentient being, with its own trajectories. This aspect is then what makes a trilogy particularly suited for an application of Jane Bennett's, quote, political project to encourage more intelligent and sustainable engagements with vibrant matter and lively things, quote end. The notion of vibrant matter relating to the capacity of things as such becomes literally alive through the figure of Father Earth, with whom humanity coexists, a relationship that changed as follows. There was an age before the seasons, when life and Earth, its father, thrived alike. Earth, our father, knew he would need clever life, so he used the seasons to shape us out of animals. The people became what Father Earth needed, then more than he needed. Then we turned on him, and he has burned with hatred for us ever since. The history of the stillness can hereby be seen as a mirror of the contemporary. Much as sustainable life ended with humans exploiting the planet in ways that have given rise to climate catastrophes, people of the stillness began to do horrible things to Father Earth. Just as the global north expansion has led to the contamination of waters, the people in the broken earth poisoned waters beyond even Father Earth's ability to cleanse. Just as the Anthropocene is marked by mass extinctions, people of the stillness killed much of the other lives that lived on its surface. Just as industrial societies are in a ruthless pursuit of oil and other earthly resources, the empire drilled through the crust of his skin to get at the sweet marrow of his bones. This exploitation of Father Earth's resources then led to the manifestation of his fury in the first and most terrible of the fifth season, the shattering season. As Father Earth aims to kill, quote, every living thing, quote end, on his skin with the fifth season, he is attributed with a particular effectivity and presented as what Latour calls actant, meaning, quote, a source of action that can be either human or non-human, quote end, leading to the notion of subjectivity to be altered as it becomes descriptive for an assumed inanimate thing. Even though most of N.K. Jemisin's narrative paints a rather pessimistic picture of the future, hope does enter the narrative, when the characters become finally aware of Father Earth's sentience, arguing, quote, that so much magic, so much life, might be an indicator of awareness, quote end, and begin to communicate with Father Earth, who speaks in seismic activity or, quote, in wavelets of heat and crushing pressure, quote end. Following, the characters slowly realize that the fifth seasons are not only the result of the prolonged exploitation of Father Earth, but were ultimately triggered when human greed led to him losing his only child, that is, when the moon was flung away from the planet. While most inhabitants of the stillness do not remember what the moon is, in their lore it is firmly established that he, Father Earth, hates because he cannot forgive the loss of his only child. Thus, the loss of the moon is what ultimately led to his rage and aim to kill every living thing on skin, and what makes the characters realize that their inherent dependency on Father Earth, insofar as an apocalypse is a relative thing, isn't it? When the Earth shatters, it is disaster to the life that depends on it, but nothing much to Father Earth. This then demonstrates how humans do, quote, not form a separate imperium unto themselves. They do not even command the imperium, nature of which they are part, quote end. Coming to terms with their dependency on Father Earth and acknowledging the crime of taking his child, Hoa, a stone eater, travels to Father Earth's heart as he recounts, in the turning depth I resonate with my enemy, or attempt to, a truce I say, plead. There has been so much loss already, on all sides, a moon, a future, hope. After having accomplished their mission to bring the moon back to Father Earth's orbit, the main characters travel back to Father Earth's heart. The heart of the world is quieter than usual. That is a good sign. It does not rage us away at once, which is a better one. We spell out the terms in pallectory fluxes of reverberation. We have given it back the moon, but in exchange the seasons must cease. There is a period of stillness, then a heavy lurching jolt of gravitation. Accept it. Instead of living off inanimate material, Jamison confronts us with a novel other that is animate and subjective in its reactions. And even though he accepts their terms, would have been capable to deny humanity its peace. This rather uncanny moment of the non-human entity of Earth being in control does not only elide the boundaries of subjectivity, but also once more foregrounds humanity's interdependency on the Earth. Since Father Earth, quote, did not start a cycle of hostilities, did not start this war, but it will rusting well have its due, quote end, humanity's only hope for survival was to reconcile with him, and in catching the moon, they indeed earned humanity a second chance. While we may not have separated our planet from its moon, in imagining the life-extinguishing aspects of the fifth season, Jamison constructed the, quote, impossible totality of a secondary world that performs a kind of mental assault, quote end, producing a radical fantasy that can alert its readers to the dangers of the terror scene in the real. By encouraging us to imagine, quote, the lively power of material formations, quote end, Jamison introduces a conception of agency that renders humanity and nature not on a vertical power plane, but advocates for a worldview that does not require the submission of assumed inanimate matter to human control. The fantastic solution of bringing the moon back to Father Earth then may provoke readers to ponder upon how we could reconcile with our Father, with our planet. Just as past generations in the stillness, quote, saw in the planet only another thing to exploit, and where they should have asked or left alone, they raped, quote end, past generations in the real did the same. Just as the fictional younger generation was able to acknowledge past mistakes and reconcile with nature, so it is upon us to find ways to help the planet healing. Embracing this hope of reconciliation with nature may very well lead to fulfilling Bennett's project to establish a political ecology of vital materiality that can, quote, augment the motivational energy needed to move cells from the endorsement of ethical principles to the actual practice of ethical behaviors, quote end, leading to the public being defined as a collective of the human and non-human. As I have shown, Game of Thrones and the Broken Trilogy both reflect on the consequences of climate change in their own way, whereby human responsibility is foregrounded and past exploits are criticized. Thereby, the uncanny representation of nature, the idea of vital materiality, as well as the inclusion of colonialism and extraction as the root of the respective climate problem, is what connects both readings. Further, through the inherent interconnectedness of various matter, both fantastic worlds challenge the conventional notion of human domination over the natural world, while simultaneously highlighting humanity's particular vulnerability to natural forces. While both fictions reflect on the repercussions of the contemporary way of life, they are both still sources of climate hope, in that they highlight how, quote, moments of catastrophic disruption can become moments of radical possibility, quote end. Representing a politics of recognition, quote, that foregrounds the visibility of another inhuman history within the historicity of the ongoing coloniality of thought, quote end, both fictions not only confront us with human ignorance of the racialized subject and of the earth as actant, but also show us a way out. What we should take away from these fictions is, for once, that climate change is a global problem that has to be answered by the global community. And while most are aware of this, it is of value that a show as popular as Game of Thrones incorporates the thinking. Another aspect we should ponder on, and with which I want to end today's presentation, is a question of how to reconcile with Earth when we can't promise him the moon.